Hey everyone, Pastor George here, and today we're going to do chapter 4 of Tim Keller's The Reason for God. And this chapter deals with the very legitimate question, why should I believe in God? Why should I trust in religion when religions cause so much violence in the world? I'm going to read something from him first, and then I'll respond with what he says and kind of add some of my own commentary on there as well. So he talks about Christopher Hitchens, who wrote this book called God is Not Great, and how religion poisons everything, I think is like the subtitle. And one of the things Hitchens brings up in that book, I haven't read it, I intend to at some point, but one of the things he brings up is that religion causes so much war. It causes people to fight about things that they can't know, right? All that type of stuff. I'm sure you've heard this argument before. And he sums up this argument pretty well. So I'm just going to read what Tim Keller has to say. So Tim Keller says, in commenting on this, Christian nations institutionalized imperialism, violence, and oppression through the Inquisition and the African slave trade. The totalitarian and militaristic Japanese empire of the mid-20th century grew out of a culture deeply influenced by Buddhism and Shintoism. Islam is the soil for much of today's terrorism, while Israeli forces have often been ruthless too. Hindu nationalists, in the name of their religion, carry out bloody strikes on both Christian churches and Muslim mosques. All of this evidence seems to indicate that religion aggravates human differences until they boil over into war, violence, and the oppression of minorities. So I think that's a really important thing to talk about when we discuss this, because obviously you can't go through any history class, right, for the whole of your time in school and not touch on religious warfare in some way. Although, to be honest, I think it's been generally downplayed. I don't think I ever learned about the Crusades in my public school education, and I'm not sure if it's something they just talk about when you go to high school. I don't know. But the point is that you either, if it's in school or somewhere else, you're going to encounter this stuff, whether it's in media or in a book you read just by yourself, right? Or the church talks about it, and so you're going to end up encountering this. And so people see this, they run into this, and they go, wow, that's really terrible that people did these things to each other. And I think that what we do, what they do there is and this is what Tim Keller focuses on in his response, right? They put the focus on the religious aspect of it and go, because religious people did this at one point, we have to throw the whole thing out, right? And he brings up very I think very succinctly, that other things that people believe in have caused them to do this, right? So, like, most famously, communist revolutions, right, led to a lot of death. The secular, right? The Nazi Party, secular. And this is my personal one. I think he only touches on this, but this is the one I bring up a lot because it has a lot to do with what we believe today and things that we hold kind of sacred, with the French Revolution, right? So, like, liberalism, small L, not left or right thing, okay? Liberalism, this idea of power to people to vote in representatives, had its kind of start, its infancy in the early 1700s, kind of was realized in the American Revolution, but was, like, fully put in place, I would say, realized in the French Revolution, to very disastrous consequences, right? So does that mean that we should throw out all of liberal thinking, all of liberal democracy, because it failed in this one place and led to tons of conflict and death and war? Because if you trace it, right, they throw over the government, they kill a bunch of people, everything goes to heck, and then Napoleon comes to power and wages war, and a lot of more people die, right? The point is that we as Christians need to see everyone in these historical events, and this is how we should see ourselves today, as sinners, right? That people make mistakes. People sometimes do not live up to the call that God places on them. Sometimes, and might be hard for us to believe, sometimes they just believe things differently than us, and from our enlightened place in the future, it's easy to look back and judge people for doing these things, but we have to deal with them now. I think the thing I would add is that when we talk about violence in religions and things, we actually have to go to the sources. So when we see things like the Inquisition, or the Crusades, or all that stuff, was that inherent to Christianity, or was that an addition, right? Well, it seems as though those things were kind of additions in these. I mean, Christians didn't use violence until they became the state religion of the Roman Empire, right? And then obviously you have a mix of state and faith, and that can lead to things like that. So I think that that's just something important to know, and that's when we look at other religions and judge whether or not they're violent, or people who act for them can be called that sort of thing or whatever, then we can say whether or not they're violent. But I think as far as Christianity is concerned, we don't see any violence in the New Testament, so we can't really, or like even in the Old Testament, it's very nuanced, right? The violence that is meted out there. So I don't know, it's just something to think about. I'll see you guys on Monday with the next chapter, but of course I know I'll see you before then because you'll all be in church on Sunday, right? So I'll see you in church.